Hello and welcome to another episode of Read It with Whiskey. This is Laura, I am your host, and today we are going to be talking to Holly Tarry. Holly Tarry is an author, speaker, and bravery coach living in Fort Collins, Colorado with her husband, son, and pets. She is a Capricorn sea goat, likely to be found on the side of a cliff, submerged in water, or traveling between the two in the family camper van. Today, we're going to be talking about her book, Power Boundaries, that goes over so much of her own personal life when it comes to personal boundaries and how to navigate that when you're in a relationship, in work situations, in personal friendships, that type of thing. How do you set boundaries? How do you know if you're going too far or if you're not giving yourself enough grace and alone time, that kind of thing. So there is just so much that we dive into today that I'm just going to keep the intro short and sweet and to the point because this episode just has so much content and so much value. And Holly Tarry is just an amazing person, and I was so honored to have her on the podcast. So let's dive into the episode. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, an interview podcast highlighting self-published authors. I am your host, Laura Juntunen. The purpose behind this podcast is to help authors grow their audience while also introducing readers to their new favorite authors. Let's get to know the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. All right, you know that we have to do a Laura J Live update. So pre-orders are still up for Transient Pulse, my first book in the Shockwave series, and those links are in the show notes. You can also visit my Instagram where I am posting about the book in more detail if you want to learn more about it before you pre-order. That pre-order is for the ebook version, and on the 28th, the paperback version will be available on Amazon as well. So keep your eyes out for that. And speaking of release days, last week's guest, Shanna Caldwell, has a book, Enchantment of Darkness. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to episode 9 when we talk to Shanna about this book and about her writing journey, because her book, Enchantment of Darkness, is going out today on March 16th. So if you have not pre-ordered, that's okay. It's out now. So you can go ahead and purchase her book via Amazon. And all of that information is in the show notes. In other news, I have actually had my book cover designer design the cover for book 2, which I'm really, really excited about. And the first people who are going to be able to see the second book's cover are going to be, 1, the people who are reading the ebook or the paperback, and 2, anyone on Patreon. So with my Patreon account, I like to give all of my readers and followers and patrons some extra content because they are supporting the podcast monetarily in some cases. And to show my appreciation, I always give them first sneak peeks into the life of Laura. So if you're interested in viewing the book cover before anyone else, that's where you're going to want to be. Go to www.patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey, and you can choose to be part of one of 3 tiers. Each tier has a little bit different benefits to it, so make sure to read the fine print there. But we got some good stuff for you there, including the cover for book 2. And if you have already ordered the pre-order for Transient Pulse, once you get that book, either ebook or print, you're going to be able to see that cover within the contents of that book, which I'm really excited about. So let's stop talking and let's start chatting with Holly. Let's get into the episode. Hello, Holly, and welcome to the Read It with Whiskey podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to dive in to talk about Power Boundaries, your new book. But first, let's tell our listeners, why did you start writing in the first place? What made you want to be an author?
I have a degree in public relations writing and have always kind of been drawn to the activity of writing and started to feel a book writing itself in my head just from my life experiences. My life just started getting really wild and transformative about 4 years ago. And as these experiences stacked up, I just felt the book writing itself in my head. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen.
That's an incredible feeling when your book is nonfiction, but I feel like I had a similar experience when I was writing my fiction earlier this year. It's like the characters were there; they were just like, "Come on, pen to paper now."
Yes, so
So I
much.
can relate to that. So tell us about your book then. It's Power Boundaries, subtitle Own Your Energy and Ditch Toxic Relationships. So tell us what inspired this book and what it's all about.
My own life inspired it. I was raised in a Southern conservative family. And what that meant for me was these really intense gender roles. I especially remember feeling them after puberty, where it just became, my mom parented me, and I think my dad parented my brother, but I was so disconnected from my dad and my brother, even though we were at the same dinner table every night and we had a literal white picket fence, but the emotional availability on the inside of the house just wasn't there. And that created this very intense sense of loneliness for me. And then a lot of tension with my mom, who was the primary point of contact for me in the family. And it all kind of culminated into feeling suicidal as a teenager when I was 16, and even went so far as gathering up a bunch of pill bottles and taking them to my room. I remember praying at the window for the courage to take them, which makes me so sad to think about now. And my mom found me and was not able to be kind. She was irritated and said, "We will not tell your father," and which caused this feeling of shame in me. And then later, my father lost his job and had some real identity reckoning kind of feelings about that, and was shuffled into all kinds of mental health services. And um, I learned from that experience, some people matter, but not me, not the baby girl of the family. And that set off a pattern the way our childhoods often do, where I was drawn to finding familiar and being drawn to over and over and over again these similarly toxic relationships. So I accumulated a lot of them. I had workplace problems and very unhealthy friendships and a lot of dysfunction in my marriage and continuing problems with my family of origin, which is kind of where it all started. And so the book is about my process of unraveling all of that.
And there's so much in there. I was blown away with how much courage you had to put all of that onto paper. So what was the process like that, deciding, okay, which stories do you want to tell? How much do you want the reader to know about you? Because it's important that they know your story so then they can understand how to use all of these practices in their own life. So how was that process for you?
Terrifying. I'd say my next book is going to be called 7 Feet Tall and Under the Bed. I don't know why, but I feel very called and pulled towards telling stories and revealing the most painful parts of my life and my experiences, and being incredibly honest about them,
Mm-hmm.
and vulnerable, which I think is something a lot of people talk about, but is very hard to actually do. And for whatever reason, I'm able to do it. And I can see and feel and experience out in the world that does not come to everyone. So it makes me want to kind of put it out there and connect with other people who have similar experiences in that way. And what's interesting is that although I seem to have this gift of telling my stories, it is not easy. I get very, very, very overwhelmed and kind of emotionally distressed, and have to spend a lot of time resting and recovering. So I do. I reveal and then I rest and recover.
Yes. And there's a lot of deep things that you go through. And that fear is really hard to get over. And especially since this is your life story that you're telling, a lot of your life story pieces. And a common question that you said your readers have is, where are you now? Like, you've gone through all of these things. What's your life like now? Are you still struggling with all of these things, or have you fixed them?
I have arrived at a place where I feel like I'm thriving, although to look at it on paper, there's a lot of loss. I'm completely disconnected with my family of origin, even beyond what was in the book, we really came to a head this summer over what I perceive as polite Southern racism all over my family.
Mm-hmm.
And my increasing distress over that. Although I think I've been squawking about it since my earliest memories. I was like, what? That's not right. So that really came to a head, and my father ended up sending a group text to the extended family asking for support and banning me from the family.
Oh,
So
goodness.
I know it's this, and like harassed me online, and really, as painful as that has been, shined a light on like, oh, this love is conditional. I had a feeling it was,
Mm-hmm.
but to have this proof and this validation, it provided clarity, even though there's just an extraordinary amount of pain in that disconnection. And I try to remind myself that I have my choices. They have theirs and I have mine, and nobody's a victim here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just choosing to say no to relationships that harm me to the extent that those relationships were. So there's this loss and the freedom that comes from having that toxicity gone. And then the really exciting part is my relationship with my family now, my husband and my son and my dog and my cat and my two
Mm-hmm.
ferrets and my neighbors and my friends. And there's a lot more room to develop those relationships. Takes so much more time and effort and energy than we want them to.
For sure.
We want them to be easy, but they never are. And the most important ones take the most work.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this really exciting partnership with my husband, and we remodeled our house. I have an apartment in the basement. So there's a lot of ways that our marriage and our life together does not look normal.
Right. The traditional stuff has gone out the window.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, we remodeled how we parent our kid. We don't put anything above emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
His grades, his chores, his sports, his social standing, all of that comes after his emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And that has created so much more connection and so much more interesting dinner time conversations. So there's a good number of relationships I lost,
Mm-hmm.
and a good important number of relationships that I deepened. And I would say I'm better off for both sides of the coin.
Right. And now you're able to share the process that you went through to help other people realize how to get out of those toxic relationships and change their life in positive ways, and show them that the traditional route isn't what everyone has to do. You can work to make yourself happy. And there's just so much content in your book that I wanted to cover today. I had to narrow it down because there was so much. But before we actually dive into the specific content, I did want to go over, somebody wrote a review for you that said that this book is the new go-to program for self-empowerment. So how does that make you feel, that all of this struggle that you've gone through, it's now transformed into something that people can use to help themselves?
I'm elated. I mean, my mission really is about smashing the patriarchy. And I'm a former lobbyist, so I'm not afraid to say things that I think a lot of people feel are political. I kind of see them as just life. And I'm really excited at the way that I can help people in their individual lives and have this broader effect of setting us all free to choose something other than the patriarchy, because it is just not working to solve these really big problems. So empowerment is a really important principle for me. I'm glad that it read that way to others, and that there is some usefulness in enhancing people's individual lives. I really do think a world where more people are set free to be their true selves is the answer to so many of our problems.
And you do this type of work in your everyday career because you are a bravery coach. And so you took, from my understanding, this book plays on the concepts that you use to teach your one-on-one clients. So elaborate if I'm wrong on that. And then also, what do you define as a bravery coach?
I sought out to be a executive coach and life coach, and was in a partnership previously business partnership that was more focused on the executive side and did a lot of group work, and realized and learned from that experience more about who I am as a coach and my kind of specific niche. And I am very direct, and I think it can feel confrontational. And I've heard that, that the book feels confrontational, although it's full of like, you got this, sister. And like, it's very gentle and loving, but it also kind of, I think, gives people this feeling of like, oh no, you see my baggage.
Right. It's like, I don't want to admit it to myself. No, you're not allowed to say that.
Totally. I mean, and we don't want to. Of course, these are
right.
Usually the toxic relationships that are draining us the most are so important to us. So we want to just like avoid what is wrong. And I am not the right coach for somebody who wants to avoid what is wrong, although we all do it to some extent. And I have a very gentle set of tactics. I am the best client for me is one who is genuinely interested in changing and looking for those decision points and willing to learn their patterns instead of judge them, and kind of be told hard truths. So bravery is about calling in that client that is ready to change and is hungry for someone to shine a light and reflect back, well, this is what you said you wanted, and point out any incongruencies in the way you're behaving from what you want. And for those who are not ready for that, we're not the right match. So bravery coach really, I think, says the most about the kind of client who is ready to receive my coaching. And it doesn't mean you're not scared, because I think actually, if you're being brave, the way you'll know is because you are scared.
Right. Terrified. Yes. I love that. And I think your book cover definitely represents the bravery. So obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't hear it, but if you're watching the video, I'm holding up the book. There's a superwoman on your cover. Or a superwoman type. Where did the inspiration for that cover come from? Is it from that bravery component? Tell us more.
Absolutely. It's from this 7 feet tall and under the bed. I mean, I really thought that the title would be 7 feet tall and under the bed. And then it just didn't really say much about what, it doesn't explain what the book is about as well. But that's the visual I have had since the very beginning of this journey, which started with publicly calling out an elected official for sexual harassment and a whole bunch of other super narcissistic behavior.
You're going to learn all about that in the book. Oh, it was so detailed. I loved it.
It was a wild ride. And, that was the most distinct kickoff to my process that I can point to. And I literally had days where I could not get vertical, was just in the fetal position, crying for hours and really, really distressed and terrified over this process. And of course, in the end, I'm proud of it, and I'm absolutely sure that it was the right path for me. But I wanted to reflect with this superhero figure. She's also like a super real chick. I mean, her hair's not brushed, and her, she's just like she's kind of show up as you are and put on a cape and you're a superhero. There's no secret to it. It's not about waiting until you aren't afraid. And that vision was always with me as the book was writing itself in my head, this vision of a very real woman who is also able to claim the spot as superhero in her own life.
That's so beautiful. All right. So moving forward, there's, like I said before, there's so much content that is within this book, and I'd love to dive into every single piece. But one thing that I want to touch on is, what is a piece of advice that seems to help the most people when it comes to setting these power boundaries?
Well, the process that's outlined in the book is 5 steps, but the most important part is the shape and how it kind of it spirals. And if you're cycling, you're not really, you have different points along the cycle. And I think a lot of people think their relationships are improving because there's a good spot on the cycle, but you have to pay attention to like, am I really fundamentally changing this? And if you think about a spiral, it does have a cyclical shape, but it progresses into a different space overall. And in that way, the first step and the last step of the process really work together. The first step is slow down to hear your true self. And the last step is own your energy and march with an open heart. And these are the bookends, but they're also, so right beside each other.
Right. All unifying together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I was a life coach in the past, and I wrote a book that also has 5 steps, completely different concept and everything. But the way that you outlined it definitely spoke to me in how my brain works. And I could understand that spiral that you were talking about. And something that I realized I hadn't been doing for my own self was that I wasn't listening to myself. So I've started doing the meditations again and the daily practices. And so that part really spoke to me, was even step 1. And I've already gone through a lot of this kind of coaching and things. But I really, really enjoyed the entire process, really. But going forward in chapter 3, we talk about the Shiro. So tell our listeners, what is a Shiro and what is the Shiro practice?
The Shiro practice, Shiro is an acronym. And it stands for, the S is slow down to hear your true self. The H is harness the wisdom of your patterns. That one's really important because repeating yourself and falling into the same traps can cause a lot of shame. And I always say shame is solution avoidant. I mean, you might have to do it. Shame and blame, you might have to do it. But once you're done doing it, let it go and learn from it. And then the E is execute boundaries to protect your energy. This is the business. This is like, you have the hard conversations, and this is the scariest step. And I wish I could save you from it. But, at some point you have to really execute boundaries. The R is recreate and attract the relationships you want, which is about, what you pull in, what your boundaries allow to come towards you. And then that last step is own your energy and march with an open heart, which is about getting in touch with what you need, want, and like. What you need is that question you can ask yourself when you're distressed. Like, what do I need right now to regulate my system? What do I want is about intentionally thinking about your free time and money and what you want to do with it, and putting it on the table. And you might have others you need to negotiate with, but put yours on the table. Really think through what you want and put it on the table. And then what I like is about, what do I like to eat? What are my favorite flavors? What's my favorite food? What's my favorite color? What clothes do I want to wear? And filling your life with more of your preferences, which takes getting to know what they are first.
Right. So that is the 5 steps. So how did you decide on that term, Shiro?
One of those things that just kind of made itself appear in my head and was like, put this on paper.
Alignment.
Yeah. So I had been writing about the concept and just kind of narrowing and funneling it down into more clarity and getting more succinct about my message. And I'm a Capricorn, so I'm always organizing things. As much as I am trying to smash the patriarchy, I'm ironically kind of building structures and organizing things and what might look like a hierarchy all the time.
I love that. So in the book, we also talk about patterns. So chapter 5 deep dives into patterns, macro and micro patterns. And what I would love for you to share with the listeners is, what is the most difficult thing that you've had to break of your own patterns?
Ooh,
oh, I know it's a big one.
Great question. I think people pleasing has been my pattern. As the baby girl of the family, the pattern that I took on early was making sure that others were okay. And I saw modeled from my mom that kind of like do more, be less, impossible thing where, you're just churning out acts of service without ever really expressing yourself or showing up fully you. And I took that pattern on, as we all do. And I think we all wish that our childhoods don't affect us the way that they do. But I took that pattern on, and then in my marriage, it played out in, his dysfunctions of blaming me when he had bad feelings. And then my dysfunctions of like, are you okay? Oh my gosh, are you mad at me? You shouldn't be mad at me. Why are you mad at me? Stop it. Oh my God, why? Oh, what am I going to do? And then kind of just like sidelining my life and spending all of my time being upset about an active conflict in my marriage. And that was a very difficult pattern for me to break. I mean, I had to build an apartment in the basement, which is a whole bunch of privilege. I realize not everyone can do that, but I think finding space, physical space, where you can literally create distance between yourself and the pattern you're trying to break, and go away to a different place and take care of yourself, soothe yourself in whatever way you need to. That was the practice that I had to put in place to stop taking care of others, which really isn't service. A dysregulated person trying to take care of someone else isn't going to work.
Right. You have to be healthy to help others be healthy.
That's right.
So with this book, you do also have a boot camp that goes along with this book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they work together, but they are also completely independent. So you can read the book and never do the boot camp, or do the boot camp and never read the book. But it's really about that drive I have to see changes happening in the world. So I wanted to give away that people who either have read the book or just are interested in the concepts to lay the concepts over their actual lives and actually make changes. It's part of that bravery coach thing where I'm like, no, really, I'm here to make some changes. And for those who want to come along for the making some radical transformations in your life ride, it's a very gentle, but meant for action way to guide yourself through the process of having those difficult conversations, transforming into a person who advocates for yourself, who decides what you want and puts it on the table as an equal interest to everyone else in the room. So that's the very practical side. It matches the book. So it has a chapter for each step of the Shiro process. It's got journaling prompts and daily meditations and worksheets where you're actually taking the concept of the chapter and applying it to your life with some kind of assignment type action to it. And then it's also got some curriculum. So there's a curriculum presentation, some like visualization and audio that add some depth to what the step is about.
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing. Like there's definitely some people out there who are listening to this saying, oh my goodness, I need more. And I would say go there for sure. So who specifically finds the most value out of this? Who are you promoting to actually join into this boot camp?
I think the right audience for me is women from toxic backgrounds. And, I have this feeling that that's everybody.
Yeah.
And then I also am like, I'm not sure I'm right about that. I think I think you have a way of assuming that your life is similar to everyone else's. And and another pattern I have to kind of watch in myself is someone will talk about how great their childhood was or whatever. And I'm like, you just don't know yet.
Right.
But I'm sure some people actually have had healthy relationships, not easy relationships, but I know that the world is full of healthy relationships. So I think that type of woman who comes from a very kind of patriarchal, these are the rules, you must fit in this box, is going to get a lot of value from my stories, because that's how I started.
Yeah, because they'll be able to mirror similar situations that you went through. And like you said earlier, when we were talking about bravery coaching, it sounds like they have to be ready to take this next step and they can't have that denial in front of them. Do you ever find people like that who are like, oh, I'm ready, but they're too much in denial to actually move forward with the process?
Yeah, all the time. And especially early in my coaching career, I mean, I definitely cast a wide net and learned from that just because something is true doesn't mean that everyone's able to receive it.
Right.
So certainly I have run into people who are not interested in my brand of truth telling. I've run into those people my whole life. And the process for me, my work has been about accepting that and just, and realizing that not everyone is going to be my people. And some of the clients that I have who are not necessarily willing to receive my coaching just go away. And all of my coaching is super flexible as far as, you don't have to buy a package and show up every week. It's what you need it to be, and it's working for you and it's serving you, or go find something that is, and that is totally fine. I mean, I have to be someone who can receive boundaries, right? I have to be someone that others can say no to. That's a really important part of that process. And then sometimes I'll have clients who are reluctant to change, but really enjoy the coaching, and what that ends up looking like is just a different pace.
Right.
People do change. They do change in life. Nobody really stays the same. Some people don't change very much. And there's a lot of value in the kind of coaching that I do along the spectrum of how quickly you can change. But if you're offended by truth telling, I am not your girl.
There you go. And that was actually something I was curious about, was how fast everyone progresses through this process. Everybody's different. Everybody's circumstances are different. And to kind of mirror the concept, I started reading your book as an ebook, and I was like, I think I need to listen to this to kind of absorb some of the information. So I listened to part of it, and then I was like, nope, I got to go back to an ebook because I got to take notes. And so everyone's different with how they perceive information and how they can actually go through everything. So is there a timeline that most people feel like they've got a concrete ground on where they're going, or does everyone go fast, go slow? What does that process look like?
I was listening to your podcast about, it was the Gray Divorce podcast, which I loved.
Yeah, Lori Robinson.
And Lori Robinson's response I resonated with so much. Like, just read the whole thing and then dig in deeper later, because I think one of the features of the kind of audience that I attract is perfectionism. That do more side of the do more, be less. Yes, you. I am not surprised that you were like, oh my gosh, I have to do it this way. No, wait, I have to do it this way, and I have to take notes. And I actually explicitly address that in the boot camp. Like, put away your notes, sister.
Yeah. Take it away.
Just absorb it and let it hit you the way that it hits you. And if it calls to you to go back in, you will. And I've done that. I have books that I have consumed in one way or another, either read it or listened to it, and then gotten a lot of value from it, but moved on. And I have those that I have listened to and then bought the hard copy and then made notes and then, had journal entries about and dug way deeper into. And I really like this book and the boot camp as both as a way to practice receiving. That's another feature of my kind of audience, is like, receive the compliments, receive the love, receive the affection, receive the messages, and hopefully the comfort of being seen the way that the book and the boot camp have a way of doing. And then you can take notes and be a perfectionist later if you feel called to do that.
Yes. I definitely, I was getting on the verge of taking too many notes. So I was like, okay, I gotta read the rest of it. But I'm one of those ones who I'm going to have to go back, and I'll probably end up getting the hard copy so I can jot my notes in the margins. My perfectionist is coming out. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So this would not be Read It with Whiskey without talking about whiskey, but we actually have something in common right now. You don't drink as a lifestyle choice. Well, I'm not drinking right now because I'm doing a 75 hard challenge. It's a fitness and mentality challenge. So I'm not drinking for 75 days. Nice. And so instead of drinking some whiskey in the evening while reading my book, I've decided to have tea in the evening. So that's kind of my new routine in the evening. So I was just wondering, for you, what is it that you do to wind down and let yourself calm down in the evenings?
It's a great question, because I am right now honing in on my bedtime routine. Also a big tea drinker.
Mm-hmm.
So tea is very likely to be in my wind down routine. And then another part of my interesting setup with my husband is that we parent 1 week on and 1 week off as if we were divorced, but we're not divorced, and we're all together all the time. But
Interesting.
ultimate like decision-making power for parenting and like getting him to his stuff and like just kind of being on
Right.
is his job for a week and then my job for a week. And it's so glorious because
Sharing
it just,
the power dynamic. Yeah.
yes. And just having a week to just kind of be and interact with the kid without
Mm-hmm.
having to be in control. So it depends on whether I'm on that week or
Okay.
not. But if I am parenting, talking to my kid is such a nice wind down. We like get in bed. We still do like bedtime stories. And
Mm-hmm.
even though we're not really even reading anymore, we're just chit-chatting about the day. So connecting with my awesome, fun, fabulous son is one kind of
Mm-hmm.
wind down. We both drink tea. We both drink Bengal spice.
Oh, I love it.
Very big fans of Bengal spice. And then on the off weeks, I have a little bit of a journaling habit. It's not super consistent, but I'm trying to get there, where I'm really looking at my day
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledging what I got done, and giving myself that confidence boost of like, I did 5 things today, even if one of them was brush my teeth.
There you go.
And then, looking at the next day and
Mm-hmm.
setting an intention for how I'm going to get through that. So those are the pieces that I'm working on my evening wind down right now.
I love that. I'm a journaler too. I love to journal in the evening. All right. So Holly, can you tell our listeners where can they find you, your book, the boot camp, all of that kind of stuff?
I am Holly Tarry author on Instagram and Facebook, and Terry is with an A. So that's the one kind of weird part about how my name is spelled. And then hollyterry.com is my website, and everything is there from the book and how to access the book in all the places, not just Amazon, but also those all important independent bookstores, which was such a process getting.
Oh yes, but it's worth it. It's worth it
so
to help them.
worth it. I mean, the system is set up to incentivize Amazon. And I learned that from this process and was like, oh no, I am not just selling on Amazon. I'm trying to smash the patriarchy here.
I love it.
So everything is there at hollyterry.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Holly. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
I learned so much from Holly Tarry's book, and I was so excited that I had the opportunity to read it and to share it with all of you. There is so much great content within this nonfiction book that I think I'm going to have to, like I even said in the interview, I think I'm going to have to go back and read it again because there's so many things that you have to take into account to actually utilize all of these different tips and tricks and advice and all of that. So I know that it's a book that I'm probably going to end up having to buy a paper copy as well, because reading an ebook just isn't the same for me. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I'm just so fortunate to have had Holly on the show with us. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you enjoyed the conversation with Holly, I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this episode on social media. Share it to your Instagram story or as a post. Tag me, tag Holly Tarry. Her information is in the show notes, and my Instagrams are at Laura J Live and at Read It With Whiskey. All right, and next week's episode is going to be with Matthew R. Budd, and he is the author of The Day I Fell Through the Earth, which is a young adult sci-fi, and it was just engrossing. I was so into the book and the plot. I decided I'm going to have to get the second book because there are 2 books in this series. So next week we will be talking to Matt about this book. So if you are interested in young adult fantasy, sci-fi type, more sci-fi than fantasy, I would say. But if you're interested in that type of book, then definitely stay tuned for next week. And until then, we'll talk to you later.